They walked into that bar like any other men, two brothers, two proud black faces, dressed sharp, calm, and carrying the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of serving their country. But within minutes, laughter turned to silence, and silence turned to fear. The stares came first, then the whispers, then the guns. No one in that room knew who they were, only what they saw, two black men who didn't belong. What happened next didn't just break the peace of a night out. It tested the very soul of justice itself. Because by the time those officers realized who they had cornered, it was already too late. Jamal and Jordan Carter weren't just brothers. They were twins who had defied every statistic ever thrown their way. Born on the south side of Chicago, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts to keep food on the table, they learned early that the world would judge them before it ever saw them. Jamal found discipline in the Navy. It became his purpose. Jordan found strategy in the Marines. It became his strength. Years later, one wore the uniform of a Navy SEAL commander, the other, a respected police captain. That night wasn't supposed to mean anything special. Just two brothers meeting at a quiet bar on the edge of town. No ranks, no badges, no uniforms, just laughter, whiskey, and brotherhood. But the moment they walked in, the air shifted. The music kept playing, but the room changed. Eyes followed them. Voices dropped. Smiles faded. They felt it instantly, that unspoken warning that said, "You don't belong here." Neither of them reacted. They'd seen worse. But when flashing lights suddenly painted the bar's windows red and blue, both men exchanged a look. Two officers entered, hands already on their holsters. Jamal's smile disappeared. He'd trained men like them. He'd led them into war zones. But in that moment, he was no longer a commander. He was just another black man in the wrong place, at the wrong time. The officers didn't ask questions. They didn't have to. In their minds, two black men in a mostly white bar meant trouble. The first officer barked about a disturbance call, but his tone was less about questions and more about control. The second officer scanned the room, hand twitching over his gun. The bartender tried to speak. "They were just having drinks, officers." His voice cracked, not out of courage, but out of fear. He wasn't defending them. He was pleading to stay out of it. "IDs," one officer demanded, stepping closer. Jordan moved slowly, steady hands, measured breaths, every movement deliberate, every second dangerous. He'd seen too many good men fall because someone reached too fast. He reached for his wallet with precision, but the officer's finger brushed his trigger. Jamal's hand shot up steady, calm. "Easy," he whispered to his brother, voice low, almost trembling. "Not as a commander. As a brother who knew that pride could get you killed. But pride is hard to silence when you've bled for your country." The first officer snatched their IDs, barely looking at them before tossing them back. "Military?" he mocked. "You expect me to believe that?" Jordan's jaw locked. His hands tightened. The years of discipline cracked under the weight of humiliation. Jamal caught his brother's gaze. "Don't." Just one word, unspoken. Then came the radio call. "All units, possible suspects match description. Proceed with caution." The words detonated like a grenade. The officers exchanged a look, fear mixed with certainty. One reached for cuffs, the other for his weapon. Time slowed. Jamal's instincts screamed to take control, to de-escalate, to survive. But even as a commander, his rank couldn't protect him from the color of his skin. The air was thick with tension. Every muscle in the room clenched tight. Jordan raised his hands slowly. Jamal followed. Two decorated officers, standing unarmed, surrendering in their own country. Outside, red and blue lights bled through the windows. Inside, dignity was being stripped away, one order at a time. And then, the radio crackled again. "Captain Jamal Carter and Commander Jordan Carter are not suspects. Repeat, not suspects." "They're ours." The words froze the room. The bar went silent. But the damage was already done. The officers hesitated, but pride is a dangerous thing. "Get on your knees!" One barked again, voice trembling. The gun stayed raised, their mistake too big to face. Jamal's pulse roared in his ears. His medals, his service, his sacrifice, none of it mattered. In that moment, his skin defined him more than his uniform ever could. He lifted his hands higher. The humiliation burned. Jordan's fists clenched, fighting the instinct to fight back. He knew what one wrong move would cost. The bar's patrons just watched, phones out, recording, whispering, waiting. Then came the captain's voice again, angrier now. "Stand down! Those men are decorated officers. Do you hear me? Stand down!" The guns finally lowered. But the silence that followed was heavier than the air before the storm. Shame hung thick. Regret hovered, but no one spoke. The damage couldn't be undone. The brothers stood side by side, breathing hard, hearts still racing. They'd survived gunfire overseas, but this was the kind of war they were never trained for. When they walked out of that bar, their steps echoed with the sound of every injustice they'd ever known. Behind them, the officers stared, faces pale, hands shaking, but the world was already watching. The video was live, and by morning, their story would ignite a nation. By dawn, headlines screamed across every feed. 2 decorated black officers targeted by police in mistaken identity incident. The footage went viral. Debates erupted. Hashtags trended. Protesters filled the streets. But for Jamal and Jordan, the world's noise couldn't drown out the quiet ache inside. They'd fought enemies on foreign soil, but prejudice had followed them home. The department called it a misunderstanding. The officers were reassigned. Apologies came, cold and rehearsed. But apologies don't erase the sound of a gun being cocked inches from your chest. Jamal returned to duty, his salute heavier, his eyes older. Jordan the Marine chose a different fight. He spoke out, first softly, then loudly, about racial profiling within the system he once defended. Some called him a traitor. Others called him a hero. He called it the truth. Months later, they stood together before a class of new cadets. Jamal looked across the sea of eager faces and said quietly, "Remember this. Honor isn't in the uniform you wear. It's in how you treat those without one." Applause filled the hall. But beneath it was pain. Because the fight wasn't over. Racism doesn't vanish with a rank. It hides. In silence, in fear, in denial. So the question isn't whether justice was served that night. The real question is, how many more must raise their hands? Before we finally learn to see beyond the color of their skin.